Today, we are talking about the rebellion that almost overthrew the Kremlin. Russia is facing its biggest crisis yet. Prigozhin, the chief of the Wagner Group's private army, was marching his troops to Moscow. The Wagner Group was a private mercenary army hired by Russia's military to help in their war with Ukraine. They played a key role as elite forces in Russia's Ukrainian invasion. However, Russia's own mercenaries turned against them. After a disagreement with the Wagner Group's owner, Prigozhin, the game was on. It was unbelievable. An armed rebellion was taking place in Putin's state-controlled Russia. This is the closest thing Russia has had to a coup in years. The question on everyone's mind at the time was, would this coup fail or would it finally take down Putin's regime in Russia? After learning of the Prigozhin threat, Putin was forced to give a late-night address to the nation following the revolt. He called the people participating in the coup traitors and marshaled Russia's forces to stop their advance. So why did the owner of the Wagner Group decide to attack Russia's capital? Prigozhin alleges his reasoning for marching his armies towards Russia's capital was simple. The Russian army had allegedly launched military strikes on its camps. Many of Wagner Group's fighters were killed. The Wagner leader's hatred for the Russian army command didn't come out of nowhere. For years now, tensions have been simmering under the surface. The Wagner Group has accused the Russian military defense minister, Sergei Shoigu, repeatedly of mishandling the conflict, failing to give their private militia the equipment they needed while claiming Wagner's victories as their own.
Это чьи-то, отцы и чьи-то сыновья, и те, которые не дают нам боеприпасы, будут в аду жрать их потроха, У нас нехватка боеприпасов 70%. Шойгу! Герасимов! Где боеприпасы? Посмотрите на них, Если вы даете норму боеприпасов, их в 5 раз меньше. Они пришли сюда добровольцами и умирают за то, чтобы вы жировали.
That missile strike on Wagner's forces in eastern Ukraine was the straw that broke the camel's back. The march to Moscow was a retaliation. The Russian army denied any role in the killings, but Prigozhin believed otherwise. He wanted justice for his troops and then justice for all of Russia. His demands for the defense minister and the Russian's military chief of staff to be fired was just too unrealistic. President Putin didn't give in to Prigozhin's march of justice and called the men marching towards Moscow a bunch of traitors. An arrest warrant was issued to Prigozhin for mutiny. Things were going well for the Wagner Group in the beginning of the revolt. They had seized control of the southern city of Rostov, an important logistical hub for the country's Ukrainian invasion.
Под контролем военные объекты Ростова, в том числе аэродром, самолеты, которые уходят.
After that, the march to Moscow began in earnest. Prigozhin and his forces went straight to Moscow through the M4 highway. Mercenaries of the Wagner Group met resistance from the Russian army midway, and the fighting slowed their advance. But it did not stop the march. Then, all of a sudden, everything changed. Apparently, the president of the neighboring country of Belarus, President Lukashenko, reached a deal with Prigozhin. The Wagner Group came within 200 kilometers of Moscow before pulling their forces back. They were turning back to avoid spilling Russian blood.
Под контроль город Ростов. Мирные жители были рады нас видеть. Мы показали мастер-класс, каким образом должно было выглядеть 24 февраля 22 года. У нас не было цели свержения существующего режима и законно избранной власти, о чем много раз говорилось. Развернулись мы для того, чтобы не проливать кровь русских солдат.
The armed rebellion had ended just as abruptly as it had begun. Prigozhin actually told everyone he never meant to try to take over Russia by force. The march to Russia was done in protest against the decision-making of the Russian Defense Ministry. Aside from the poor handling of Russia's Ukrainian invasion, Prigozhin explained Russia's Defense Ministry had wanted the Wagner Group mercenaries to sign up to the Russian army. Now that doesn't look too unreasonable on the surface. However, the Wagner Group belongs to Prigozhin, so having his Wagner Group mercenaries joining the Russian military was tantamount to ceding control of his troops to the Russian army. It was a crackdown on the Wagner Group leader. Prigozhin clearly didn't want to lose his private army he spent years cultivating. It was not a coup allegedly, and he never wanted to overthrow the Russian government. Whether Prigozhin was serious about his explanations or not, we will never truly know. Prigozhin felt the Russian army was incompetent. Their attempt at conquering Ukraine was pathetic. According to the Wagner Group owner, he felt his private army troops were elites who didn't deserve to join such an inefficient group that was the Russian army. The end of the coup was so abrupt, many observers thought it was all an orchestrated attempt to test the loyalty of the Russian elites. Some believed both Putin and Prigozhin conspired to fake the coup so they could remove the defense minister Sergei Shoigu. It didn't help that the Kremlin, Russia's government, basically gave the Wagner Group amnesty, allowing them to stay in a safe haven in Belarus. After the revolt, President Putin actually gave the Wagner Group two options. Option 1 was to join the Russian army. Option 2 was to join Prigozhin in the country of Belarus. It was either submission or exile. President Lukashenko from Belarus has offered the Wagner Group a place to stay in his country. Soldiers of the Wagner Group will be living in an abandoned military base there. For European countries surrounding Belarus, the Wagner Group's position in the country is alarming because that puts those troops in Belarus right on the doorstep on a number of NATO allied countries. The mutiny has sparked hope across the world. Putin's grip on power is slipping. This coup could be a sign of better things to come. So what is the Wagner Group and where did it come from? The Wagner Group is a private military company run by Mr. Prigozhin. What they do is that they offer their mercenary services in exchange for money. It is not uncommon for governments to hire mercenaries in times of war. The US has hired mercenaries to do their bidding in their Afghanistan wars. The Wagner Group is a business basically. Prigozhin himself is no saint. He's made blood money from war crimes across the world. For years, the Kremlin has denied any links to the Wagner Group while using them to invade countries for their natural resources. The easiest way to describe it is Russia wanted a way to send their armies across the world to force Russian interests through murder. Then once the Kremlin achieves their goal overseas, Russia is able to deny the atrocities committed by the Wagner Group. The Russian government is hiding behind the back of Russian law that says mercenary companies are illegal in Russia, so there's no way the Wagner Group is linked to the Russian government because that would be illegal. This gives the Russian government plausible deniability over their war crimes. Thankfully, the days of a paramilitary group secretly controlled by the Russian state has come to an end. I hope you liked the video. Leave a like if you did, subscribe if you haven't already. It's much appreciated.